Hello, my name is Kim Haskell, and today I'll be sharing with you a tutorial to create this fun Easter tag using some of my favorite Ranger products. We'll begin by using the Letterit polka dotting stencil. I'm going to be applying embossing ink to all of the open areas of the stencil using an ink blending tool. I'm working on top of the Wendy Vecchi Mini Make Art Station. The metal base and magnets allow me to secure the stencil firmly on top of my tag so that it doesn't slip while I'm applying the embossing ink. As well, I'm using one of the magnets to act as a mask because I want to leave one of the circles from the stencil free of embossing ink where we will later create our Easter chick. Once the tag was fully covered with the embossing ink, I removed the stencil, and then picking up the tag by the edges, I'm just laying the Make Art Station to the side temporarily and bringing in a sheet of scrap paper. Now I'm sprinkling white embossing powder over the entire surface of the tag, making sure that all of the areas that have been covered in embossing ink are now covered in the embossing powder. Again, grabbing the tag by the edges, now you'd want to tap off any excess embossing powder. And if there are any stray areas of embossing powder on your tag, you can sweep those away with a small paintbrush. All of the excess embossing powder on your scrap paper can go back into the container for future use. And now we heat set the entire tag until all of the embossing powder has melted and is shiny. Now we're ready to begin creating our Easter chick. I've brought back the Make Art Station, and I'm realigning our stencil in roughly the same position that it was in before, and then secure the stencil to the tag using the magnets. To create our base layer for our chick, I'm using Squeezed Lemonade Distress ink and applying that with an ink blending tool to the open area of our stencil. To add some extra definition to our chick, I'm using a detail blending tool and Rusty Hinge Distress ink and applying that only to the lower and right edge of our circle stencil and blending it with a circular motion. I also went back in with the ink blending tool that had the squeezed lemonade on it, and again using a circular motion, blended out any harsh edges. Now that we've completed the body of our chick, we are finished with the stencil, so we can lay that as well as our Make Art Station to the side. And to create the details on the chick, we're going to use the Letterit Treading Hearts stencil. We'll begin by making the feet of our chick, so position a heart slightly below the body and facing outwards, and again using the detail blending tool. This time we're applying Carved Pumpkin Distress ink to create the orange feet. Rotate your stencil so it's facing outwards in the opposite direction to create the second foot. We'll also use the stencil to create the wings for our chick. Position the heart so that the rounded edge is coming off of the side of the body. And again, using the detailed blending tool, we're going back to the squeezed lemonade distress ink and applying that to create the wing. We repeat this on the other side of the body. Now that we've created the structure of our chick, we're going to add details to make it really pop from the tag. I chose to go with a graphic illustrated look, so I'm using the Letter It fine liner. This is the black one in size 01, and I'm beginning by outlining the hearts that we use to create the feet. Now what you'll notice is that I'm actually retracing my lines a couple of times, and I'm not making them perfect. I want this to look a little bit sketchy, a little bit edgy. Definitely no perfection needed here. And I'm doing the same for both of the feet. And then to create the chick's body, I wanted it to look a little bit fuzzy, a little bit fluffy. So I'm using a technique called stippling, where I'm dotting the pen against the paper, so it's just a bunch of dots that are creating that outline. This creates a really fun texture. Along the way, I am also outlining both of the wings using the same technique as the feet, where I'm making a couple of lines that don't perfectly overlap one another to make a sketchy, imperfect, illustrated look. Using a couple of quick flicking motions with the pen, I'm also applying some detail to the top of the head to appear like small fluffy feathers. Next, we create the eyes by simply drawing 2 black circles. This is an optional step, but I also added a couple of small C-shaped strokes on the outsides of each eye to look like eyelashes. The beak was made using an upside down raindrop shape. And then I colored that in using the Letter It fine liner in orange. For a little added detail, I'm going back in with the 01 fine liner and adding a few more stippled dots along the area that we had applied the rusty hinge earlier to create a little bit more depth and shadow along that side of the chick. Next, we'll apply some color to the edges of the tag using Wilted Violet and an ink blending tool. What you'll notice here is that I begin applying the color outside of the tag on the silicone mat and dragging it inwards. This prevents any harsh lines when doing blending with an ink blending tool. I repeated this ink blending technique on the small circle of cardstock that we'll be using for our greeting as well. The embossed areas of our tag will resist distress ink, so I'm going in with a dry paper towel to lift any of the ink that is on those areas to keep everything nice and tidy. I'm also tidying my workstation with a little bit of water on the silicone mat and wiping away the excess ink. Now it's time to create our sentiment for our tag. You can certainly feel free to use stamps for your greeting, but I'll be sharing some hand lettering here. I'm writing the greeting Happy Easter, and for that I'm using the Letter It fine liner in size 04. And for the word happy, I've gone with a simple block letter style. And for Easter, I've opted to go with a bouncy, modern faux calligraphy look. To create this look, you'll begin by writing your letter in a script style. So if you're used to using cursive writing, for example, you can use that. But basically, you have all of your letters connected to one another. And once you've completed your word, go back to the beginning, and everywhere that your pen was moving in a downwards direction to create your letter, you'll want to thicken those lines up. And this is something that's called faux calligraphy, and it gives the look that your lettering has been created with a calligraphy pen. For a little extra detail on our sentiment piece, I'm simply creating a pattern around the edge of our circle by using dots and dashes. And the last step of our tag is to eyeball where we would like our greeting to go, and then snip a small piece of adhesive foam. Then we adhere that to the back of our greeting and secure the greeting in place onto our tag. And here we have our completed Easter tag. Thank you so much for joining me on this project.